and welcome to Matt's Mission Marine, your home for my take on boats, waterways, and conversations along the way. Today, we're out here in Charleston, South Carolina. We're going to be talking to a local captain. So strap on those life vests and let's get going. All right, just cruising around here in Charleston with Captain Chris with Keel and Time Fishing Charters. So how did you get involved in charters?
Well, I originally got my captain's license when I worked for Rampage Sport Fishing Yachts back in the early 2000s. I worked there delivering boats and doing test runs on boats, and I got my sea time up and went and got my captain's license. And then I ended up moving from there to Charleston and worked for Cummins Mercury Diesel, which is a joint venture where I helped manage the boats in the water and was in charge of all their testing boats. And while I lived here in Charleston, I had a roommate that did charters full time, and he had more charters than he could run, so he encouraged me to help him out some. So that's how I got started running fishing charters.
One of the things that Chris and I want to go over today before we head out is what happened last year in the Bahamas. They had a terrible hurricane come through, and Chris wanted to say a few words about that and how you guys can help out.
Yeah, Matt, I'm wearing this shirt today just to remind everybody about Hurricane Dorian hitting the Bahamas, particularly the Aba Coast. They got a ton of damage there. They're still recovering from it. I was just over there about 3 weeks ago, and there's still a ton of roofs off of houses, and folks not living in their houses anymore because they're not livable. So just want to help everybody remember that, and whenever the COVID's over with and they allow tourism back over there, if you can get over there, spend some money with them, enjoy the Bahamas, it will be helpful to their efforts.
Keep them, if nothing else, in your thoughts and prayers, because they definitely need it. Still trying to get their lives back together over there. Let's go ahead and jump in, Chris. As you guys can tell, we're out here on the boat, getting ready to head out on the water. But before we do, we've got to go through the safety checklist, and that's definitely something you want to do before you get ready to head out. I'm going to post a picture of Chris's checklist up here on the screen for you guys, and we've also got laid out everything that he kind of gets together, and we're going to have Chris run through that with us real quick here.
I highly encourage anybody who's going to be going boating to have a list. The more frequently you go, the less you'll have to reference it. But I've been doing this for decades, and I still use a list. It's just cell phone. I printed it out today just for reference, but it's right on my phone. I kind of check stuff off as I go. So the first stuff I'm going to go over today is really safety stuff, things you need to do before you get to the boat ramp, or go out on the water for the day. And then the second part of the list is more equipment you're going to want to enjoy your trip.
And this can vary depending on what kind of trip you're going on too, right?
The equipment, yes, and the safety equipment part of it, that varies as well with where you're boating at and what kind of boating you're doing. I do a lot of saltwater boating in the harbor and near shore, and also I go offshore with this boat. So some of the safety equipment I have is geared towards charters and also for the locations that I'm going. But I'll try to get into a little bit of that as I go along.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you.
Yep. So on the safety list here, one of the first things you want to do, it sounds obvious, but make sure you put the plug in the boat. It's going to happen to everybody sooner or later that you'll forget that. So just make sure that's in there. You have to have enough life jackets for everybody who is on the boat. And not only do you have to have enough life jackets, you have to have the right life jackets. So you can't have 4 adult life jackets and have a kid on board. You have to have a life jacket that is made for that kid. So make sure you have the right stuff. You have to have a throwable preserver on most boats. The larger the boat is, it may graduate to you having to have an actual throwable life ring. So you'll have to check the regulations for what is required for your boat and get that proper equipment. I recommend West Marine. They are a great resource for determining what you need for your size boat in your area that you're boating. Another thing I have, a couple right here laid on the deck, is a handheld VHF. Especially when you're fishing, when you're out on the water, large bodies of water, or down at the coast, you're going to want to have a handheld radio, waterproof. The newer ones float. Recommend getting one of those. And also a personal locator beacon. I have one of those on the boat as well. If you get in trouble, you can set this off, and it notifies the Coast Guard of who you are, where you are, and they'll pull out all the stops trying to come help you. So those two things there are very important pieces of safety equipment. I keep them in a dry box, along with some other stuff, like glasses cleaner and things like that. I actually have a thing for starting fires in here. I just keep that stuff in this box, and it comes on and off the boat as I come off the boat. It's dry. It's something that I can grab if we get in a bad situation. We know we need to don our life jackets and prepare to maybe get off the boat. And you want to have someone make sure they have that with them. Okay, so the next thing, when you're in larger bodies of water and also in coastal areas, you are required to have flares. Depending on your boat and where you're going, you have to get the right set of flares. So I have a flare kit for my boat that meets all the requirements, daytime flares, nighttime flares, and it's proper for where I am spending time at on the water. And it's very important you check the dates on the flares and make sure that they are in date. That will get you in trouble if you have a flare kit and it's not in date, if you get pulled over and checked, because that stuff's just like any other piece of safety equipment, it's supposed to be up to date. You have to have some kind of a signaling device on the boat, like a horn. Most boats have horns, but you want to check it before you go out every trip. I highly suggest that you bring an air horn with you and as a backup. The air horn is much, much louder than a boat horn, and it gets people's attention a lot better. And so I have one right here, and just a regular old air horn, and then the mount that goes on it. I keep them separate and keep it kind of sealed up so the salt water doesn't bother it. While we're talking about it, this whole box here is full of critical spare parts. So I have an air horn, I have a spare fuel filter, I have a spare fuel primer, I have a plug for my live well, a plug for the boat, very important, spare one, and a spare external fuel filter. So is anything you think you might need on a voyage, could stop you from coming home, it's good to have an extra one of them, or something you might lose like a plug. Let's see. Moving right along, you're required to have fire extinguishers on boats. They have to be of the right type. Fire extinguishers have to be like dry chemical type typically. Depends on the size of the boat, what size you need and how many you need to check those regulations. You want to check this every time before you go out. Make sure that it is on full. If it's on empty, it's not going to do you any good, and it'll also get you a ticket from the Coast Guard. Before you want to take off from your house, you may have trimmed your motor down when you got home. Make sure you trim that up before you leave. That should be on your checklist so you don't drag your motor on the ground. If you have a VHF antenna on your boat, like I have on my boat right here, I have an 8-foot VHF antenna. When you're going down the road, you're going to want to have that down. You don't want to rip it off. When you get on the water, though, it's very important to put it up. And if it's on top of the T-top, it's really important to remember to put it up. The last thing you want to do is get in an emergency situation and be calling Mayday and nobody can hear you because you've got your radio antenna down and you're just shooting the signal right into the water. Let's see. Make sure your batteries are charged up. If you got multiple batteries on the boat, make sure they're in good condition. A lot of boats have voltmeters on. Flip it to each battery and look at the volts on the battery. A fully charged battery should be around 13 volts. Make sure you have enough fuel for your voyage that you're going on. And you want to have a reserve of about a third of a tank for fuel. Nav lights, that's something that's really easy to forget these days. On the old days, they were pretty much fixed mounted on boats. These days, a lot of times they are removable. I know mine stays in my garage whenever I'm going on day trips, just so it doesn't get damaged. You gotta always remember to put that back on the boat, check it, put it on, make sure it's working. You don't want to get out there at nighttime, turn your light on and it not work. So check your bow light, check your anchor light or all-around light, stern light, whatever you have on your boat. Different boats have different setups for the nav lights. Different size boats are required to have different strength nav lights. Another thing I highly recommend if you're going to be doing any boating at nighttime is some sort of a spotlight. I used to carry one that plugged into a cigarette lighter and it was real big and bulky and had a cord, and it worked fine, but it was just a pain to deal with. But nowadays, with the technology we have, a simple mag light with the 3D cells in it, the LED style, will more than suffice for what you need. You can light up a marker from a mile away with this thing. They work very, very good, and you can stick them in your pocket while you're running or have them nearby. So I keep this on my boat at all times to make sure I have that at nighttime. I was out on the water last night and I ran up on a boat that didn't have any lights whatsoever on the back of it. I got lucky and saw their wake coming off their boat. That's how I saw them. But nav lights are obviously out. But if you have an emergency like that and your nav lights go out, you should have someone on the boat with a light, and if somebody's coming up behind you, you shine that light in their direction so they'll see you. The phone, everybody has cell phones these days, and the more you have on the boat, the more you can communicate with people. Make sure you have that with you. It's fully charged up, or a way to charge it on the boat, preferably also. I mentioned critical spares already. One thing I didn't show here that I have on my boat as well is a spare prop, and I also have spare hardware for that prop in case when I'm changing it I'll lose something or it came off when it got damaged. And then obviously you're going to need a toolbox on the boat with all the proper tools to do any kind of these repairs underway. Another thing I consider safety equipment would be your anchor system, your anchor rod, your anchor. I have 2 anchors on my boat. I recommend having, for your primary anchor, an oversized anchor. I always get one at least one size larger than what's called for my boat. So in my boat, I have Dan Forest style anchor. My boat is 17 foot long, and you'll notice it's still got the West Marine sticker on it. It says for boats up to 24 feet. So this is my primary anchor. I have an anchor, and then I have 6 to 8 foot of galvanized 3/8" chain. That chain is critical. This anchor will not work without that chain. It's really important you have chain, and I have 100 feet of rope on it. That's my primary anchor system. My secondary anchor system is a smaller, same style anchor. Similar setup. I have the same amount of chain on this anchor to give it a good shot at holding well. I use both these anchors sometimes depending on the situation I'm in. Especially if I'm going to a beach or something, I'll throw one up on the beach, throw one up behind the boat. Another thing I have, it's not really super important for anybody inshore, but I go offshore. I have an additional 100 foot of line that I can just tack right onto that main anchor system to let me have more depth. Anytime you're anchoring, you gotta have out a good bit of scope on the line. You can't just be in 10 foot of water and put out 10 foot of anchor rope. It will not hold. In general, you want to have at least probably 5 times the depth if possible. It really depends on how deep the water is and how much the current is, things like that. But if you want it to hold, if you were in an emergency situation, you might want to make sure you didn't move. You should put like 7 to 1. That's just to make sure you would never move. And in general, use 4 or 5 to 1 is enough. Before you go out on the water, most boats these days have bilge pumps. You're going to want to check your bilge pump for functionality. Hit the switches, make sure they work, but more importantly, go back there, look at the bilge pump. There's a way to flip that float switch on all float switches. You just have to figure out how to do yours. Flip the float switch, make sure the thing comes on. Matter of fact, I'd like to go ahead and show you that on my boat. So there's an access panel somewhere on your boat. You just lift that up. And in my boat, I have 2 bilge pumps. I'll talk about that in a minute. But here's my primary bilge pump. It's a 500 gallon per hour. It's got the built-in float in it. It's a Sierra. Those things, you want to make sure it's just got the little knob on it right here. You just flip that up. And I don't know if you can hear it or not, but it's running right now. So I know when that floats up, it's going to run. And it's also not sticky. It's free moving. That's what you want. I just checked that guy. Now, I would highly recommend for anyone if you're going to be going out, anywhere where you're out of sight of land, I guess is a good way to put it, but really for anyone, cheap insurance is to have a high water alarm in your boat and connect it to a second bilge pump. It's a cheap thing to do, and it'll save you a lot in an emergency situation. So basically at the top of this pump here, I have one about 3 inches off the bottom of the boat. There's another float switch right here, and that float switch is hooked to a 2,000 gallon per hour pump. And if the water ever gets up above where this pump is pumping and it's not keeping it out enough, kind of keeping up enough, then this one will go off. It'll sound an alarm and tell me that my bilge is filling up with water, and also kick on this other pump. There's a way to check this switch as well. I can put my 2 fingers on it, and you'll hear the alarm go off, and that pump comes on. And that's the noise you don't really want to hear when you're out in the water, but it's good to know about it if it does. I've had a situation one time where I took a boat off a trailer. I forgotten to put the plug in, like I said, on the checklist. It's number 1 thing on the checklist. Backed the boat off the trailer, and I was in deeper water. I didn't have the option of putting it back on the trailer. I ran this scenario by my son the other day in a training exercise. I said, "What would you do in that situation?" And he thought about it for a second, and he said, "I would drive it up on land." That is a very good option if you have to do that. You know, if you're somewhere where you can just beach the boat and you've got water coming in the boat and you don't know how to stop it, the boat on the beach, it can't go down but so far. That's one good option. I told him, I was like, you know, in the next case I didn't have that option. The most important thing to do in any emergency situation is, after you initially freak out a little bit about it, don't panic. Like, get your wits about you. So what I did was I heard the alarm go off. I turned around. I instantly saw there was water shooting out both sides of my boat from my high water alarm and my normal bilge pump. So I had a leak that was both of those pumps couldn't keep up with. I realized I hadn't put the plug in the boat. So, you know, I was around a bunch of other boats. I couldn't put it back on the trailer. I'm like, okay, well, I cut the motor off. I trimmed up the motor. I grabbed the plug. I reached over the back of the boat and I put the plug in. And the pumps pumped the rest of the water out when we were fine. So it's just, you know, really important if you do have some kind of emergency, you know, don't panic. Okay, the last thing on the safety checklist that I would recommend everybody go over before they go out on their trip is the fixed mount VHF radio. You're going to want to have one of these if you're on any kind of large body of water, or if you're down here at the coast, you know, going offshore, or even inshore, doesn't matter. This is your number one piece of communication equipment on a boat. This is how you call other boats. It's how people call marinas, call bridges, and most importantly, the Coast Guard. So you're going to want to make sure it's working. Channel 16 is the primary channel you would want to monitor. So the way you check your radio before you go out is you do a radio check. And in the old days, people would call on channel 16 and ask for someone to give them a radio check. But you don't want to really do that, because channel 16 is for hailing other vessels and also for emergencies, and you don't want to do radio checks on the channel. Fortunately, CETO has set up a automated radio check service that you can check your radio, and it will actually let you hear yourself during that check, which is very valuable, much better than the old way of doing it. So I'll show you real quick how you do that. Here in Charleston, our channel for doing that is channel 27. You can go to the CETO website and research there where to do an automated radio check in your area. So you just go to channel 27. You pick up your mic. This one, this is short fin. This is short fin. This is short fin. Calling for a radio check. And then you wait.
Thank you for using the CETO automated radio check service located at the Charleston Harbor Marina.
This is short fin, this is short fin, this is short fin, calling for a radio check.
Download the CETO app for iPhone and Android today. It's the best boating app, no matter how you look at it.
All right, so there you have it. That's how that works. It's really easy, non-threatening, easy way to check your VHF radio. You want to do that every time you're going out, so you know that it's working in case you need it, even in an emergency. You also want to do that with your handheld periodically and make sure that thing's still working as well. All right, so that covers all the safety items and like kind of pre-launch items on the checklist. The other stuff on the checklist, the things you're not going to want to forget. Like I said earlier, you're spending time and money to go out. You don't want to get out there and not have the things you need to enjoy your trip. So if you're fishing, you're going to want to remember to bring things like your license, your bait, your water is really important, your suntan lotion, your cast net, whatever you may need for fishing, put that on your list. Anything you think you may want to think about, put it on your list. That way, if you need it, you take it. If you don't need it, you leave it at home. But at least it's there to remind you. So, being a charter captain, I can't forget my bait. If I do, we get out there and we're not able to get the fishing done we want to get done. So a little pro tip is you can take your keys to your truck, put it in the freezer or refrigerator with your bait. You'll never leave your bait at home. I do that with my bait. I do that with my lunch a lot of times. That way I'm guaranteed that stuff comes with me when I'm on my trip. If I'm 20 miles offshore, I don't find out that my frozen cigar menders are in my freezer at home. So just wanted to throw that pro tip out there. And that's pretty much it.
Really appreciate Captain Keel taking a few minutes out of his time to run over those things with us real quick. As you guys can tell, right here in Charleston, South Carolina, we've got an old retired aircraft carrier sitting behind us here. That aircraft carrier, it reminds me of something. It reminds me of the freedoms that we enjoy here in the good old US of A. And that brings me to a point. These videos I'm making, it's not free. I need some subscribers, I need some likes, and I need some people to ring that bell and get the notifications so you guys don't ever miss some of my video action. Talk to you soon.